Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next family chat. We have Kelsey Axe and Lauren Hayes with us today, and we are going to talk about communicating with instructors. And before they introduce themselves, I'm Caroline Davis, and I'm the graduate assistant for transition programs. And I facilitate the family chats, and I also write our family newsletter that comes out every month. And so before we start diving into some plain questions we have, I also encourage you to comment some questions if there's anything that you are wondering about what it's like to communicate with instructors. But like I said, before we jump into those questions, I'm going to let Kelsey and Lauren introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, my name is Kelsey Axe. I'm the interim coordinator for first year studies within University College. That's a really fancy way of saying I'm an academic advisor and I oversee a lot of the curricular pieces within University College. I help coordinate the Uni 101 freshman seminar class that all first year students will take. I work with our learning communities as well as our kind of Uni 201, which is for transfer students.
My name is Lauren. I am a senior. I'm an adapted special ed major with a minor in applied behavioral analysis. And I am a Seahawk Link. So I work for the Office of Transition Programs with the uni students.
Yes, so we have the perfect combination, and we have a uni instructor as well as someone who has taken a uni class and works with uni students on campus. And so I have some plain questions, and like I said earlier, if you have any questions, feel free to comment those, and they'll either be answered in the comments or they will be sent to me, and we will answer them live. And so the first question that I have for Kelsey is, how do professors and instructors prefer to communicate with students?
Yeah, so I think this is very independent with each instructor. So I would encourage your student to kind of reach out to their instructors early on in the semester. A lot of times this is even in the syllabus. Some instructors prefer email, some like Canvas, which is where a lot of their coursework will be housed. There is a messenger function within Canvas, some prefer that. Others would prefer phone communication. It really just is dependent upon each instructor. I myself like email. It's just a little bit easier for me to kind of keep things organized. I'm always kind of on the go to, whether I'm in the office, I might be in a meeting, I might be in class. So I'm not always near my phone, which makes it a little harder to communicate. So I tend to stick with email, but I think it's really up to each instructor. I know some are open, they'll text with their students, but I would say email is probably the most popular, with that Canvas Messenger being the most kind of secondary to that, because it's a very similar to an email communication.
And then within that, what are some of the common mistakes that students might make when trying to communicate with their instructors, and how can they avoid those things?
Yeah, we actually teach email etiquette in a lot of our Uni 101 classes because of this, because I think it's very common for students in particular to not put their name or to just put their first name. And if your first name's Sarah, there might be a couple other Sarahs in the class. It's hard to kind of differentiate. The way UNCW's emails are is most student emails are kind of 2 to 3 letters with about 4 numbers behind it. And they don't always make sense to what that student's first or last name is. So it can be hard to guess. So I think the biggest thing is just identifying yourself of what's your name. If you can provide your 850, that's really helpful. That allows us to kind of get into the systems we need to make sure we're looking up the right student. It's also really helpful to identify which class you're in. You might be in a class, for example, your English, where your instructor might be teaching 3 or 4 other sections of English. So to just say, hey, I'm in your English class might not be the most helpful for them. So always name, 850, which class they're talking about, and then just be kind of polite. Most instructors respond really well to students asking questions. They want to be engaged with their class. But be straight and to the point as well. So don't ramble on a ton, which I realize I might be doing a little bit of now. And then the other piece that's not as much about the email communication as much as just timing of it. Students don't always realize that a lot of faculty work on that 8 to 5 timeline. So they might not be checking their email after work hours. There are some assignments that are due late though. So for example, some of my asynchronous assignments this semester are due at 11:59 on Sundays. I have encouraged my class to take a look at those assignments prior to the weekend so that if they do have questions, I'm able to help them out. But if you send an email at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, I'm likely not going to see it. And most faculty are that way too, where they're not looking at email kind of after that 8 to 5, they're not checking on the weekends. And also letting your student know that, timing of a response is something to be aware of, not always getting an immediate response. Sometimes you might happen to email an instructor at the perfect time where they're just happen to be sitting at their email, see it come in and can respond right away. But again, there might be another situation where they're teaching another class and it might take them a couple hours or even a day to see that email. So just also being patient with that communication in general and that follow-up that an instructor has. So don't jump the gun and saying like, hey, you didn't answer my email if it's only been an hour or two. But if it's been a day or two, you can always send a nice polite follow-up saying, hey, I don't know if you saw my last email. Can you help me with X? Those are probably the biggest mistakes I see students make, but once they kind of adjust to it, they do really, really well with the email communication.
Yeah, and I know like when I was starting undergrad, I always felt bad about if I had to send a follow-up email. And so I know I was always a little anxious about that, but you just said like it's okay to do that.
Definitely. There are times where I'll get an email in the middle of a meeting and I'll read it, but I'm not able to respond right away. And my head will say, oh, I'll get to that in a second. But then something comes up in the meeting that I have to follow up immediately with, and it just might get kind of pushed down. So I always appreciate that follow-up email. Again, as long as it's not immediate, where it sounds like you haven't given me that time to really read it and respond. But if it's been a little bit, give me a little nudge, because chances are it got pushed down further in my inbox and I won't find it for a while.
Thank you. And then Lauren, I have a couple questions for you. Have you developed any relationships with instructors? And if so, how has that been beneficial both inside and outside of the classroom?
So being a special ed major, there are not a lot of professors that I will have their classes. So there is one professor, I think I've had her like 7 times. I love her, she's amazing. I have her for 2 classes this semester. And I mean, at this point, it's like, shoot me a text if you need anything, because we've had her for so long, which helps a lot, especially when we have questions on assignments. Because, as you like progress through your years, your classes get a lot more serious, a lot more like major focused. And so when, you do have those questions come up, it's a lot easier if you have that bond with a professor, to where you just tell them what's up, you're comfortable with them. It just makes everything so much easier.
And then what have you found to be the most successful when communicating with faculty and instructors?
Definitely, like Kelsey said, shoot an email. If you have any questions, look at your assignments in advance, so that you can send that email within that 8 to 5 window and give them enough time to respond. Normally, in my experience with most of my professors, they say give me 24 hours. If I don't respond in 24 hours, then shoot me a follow-up and I'll see it and I'll get back to you. But definitely look at assignments in advance. Send the email. Don't be afraid to send the email. That was my problem when I first started. I was always afraid to send an email to my professor. But as the years gone on, it's gotten a lot easier. So definitely ask for help if you need it.
Once I learned, because I feel like we always hear like the stereotype of college professors not wanting to help you and like wanting you to do terribly. Once I was so nervous like you about sending emails, and then I realized like they want us to succeed. They want us to help. Just send the email. Don't be a little nervous, because I know that, like I said earlier, that was my thing. So it's once you find out that professors are on your side and there to help, it makes life so much easier.
Well, and we need you guys to communicate with us, because if you're not, I'm assuming that everything in my class is going great and nobody has questions. So if you're not asking them, I'm not providing any additional support or any resources in that sense, or clarifying an assignment, because nobody's asked me anything. And there's nothing worse, in my opinion, is walking into a class and students going, well, I didn't do that assignment because I didn't understand. Well, what was confusing? Because it might have been something I wrote was confusing, but until somebody points it out, I don't know. So as scary as that email can be, know from an instructor side, like we want you guys to reach out and say that. I had something on my Canvas page this week that I had never published. I missed a checkbox. There's like 4 you have to click and I missed one. So I was like, cool, we're all set. They're going to be able to do their assignment. Only one student emailed me and said, hey, I can't actually see any of this. Had that person not emailed me, the entire class wouldn't have been able to do their homework assignment. But I wouldn't have known about it because I thought we were good. So that would be my lesson, I'd say, is as scary as it is. Like, if you don't reach out to us, we are assuming everything is fine. So you might be stressing beyond belief. And I'm sitting over here going, class is going great. I want to help.
For sure. And then with this semester looking a little bit different, how does communication differ from an in-person class to an online course?
I guess I'll start. So I am teaching an online class. I wouldn't say it differs a whole lot, with the exception of there is no possibility for face-to-face communication. Like, anything we do face-to-face would still be through technology. That's not to say we can't set those up though. So typically it is still starting with an email. And if the concern, question, whatever you need help with is a little bit more intense and isn't just a simple answer through email, I might reach out to the student and say, hey, maybe we should set up a Zoom meeting just to kind of go through some of this. Similar to what would have been office hours on campus, just having students come in and ask whatever questions they have. I've been trying to maintain some of that with this online area too, just because, like I said, I want to get to know my students and I want to make sure they succeed. And I do think that that kind of one-on-one connection is important too. It just takes a little bit more scheduling and being creative that way, rather than having a set time that I can sit at the coffee shop or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely different on my end too, because all of my classes are online. So where I used to just be able to like hang out after class, talk to the professor, you know, if they had somewhere to go, I could like walk to their office with them if they needed to go to their office after class. Now I can't always do that. So it definitely, it's a lot. I think it's harder, but I just send an email and I'm like, hey, I need some help with this, or like, hey, can we talk about this? And my professors are amazing. They're great. They're always like, yeah, let's set up a time to meet. And then it's just another Zoom meeting and we just sit there and we can talk about anything.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely different, but I also agree. My professors have also been really great, and we're making it work, and we're making it a good semester. And then, so why is it important for students to communicate with instructors? In addition to, it makes the instructors' lives easier if they know what students are confused about, and it can make the students' life a little bit easier. But have you found any other benefits?
I think for the Uni 101 class in particular, you know, part of that class is that transitional piece to UNCW, to college as a whole. It's not as textbook driven in the sense of like, I have to get through chapter 1 to get to chapter 2 to get to chapter 3. It is a lot more flexible and I'm able to adjust it to what my class's needs are. Like, for example, the Hurricane Katrina semester, which was just notorious for everyone here. We did time management 3 times in that class because we did it initially and then we were gone for a month because of the hurricane. So everybody's schedules shifted. So we had to do it when we first came back. And then I had students that were telling me, we're coming up on finals. And up until this point, I've been taking it kind of one day at a time. I don't know how to do that when I have 3 exams in 2 days. I need help with how to plan for this. And if they hadn't been talking to me about that, I wouldn't have been able to make adjustments. I can't even remember what we were supposed to do that day, but this was obviously more beneficial for them. So for me, that's a big piece too, of like, I can kind of tailor my class to what their specific needs are, rather than me taking a guess at what's best for that course. But if you're not communicating with me, it's kind of my best guess goes. And if you're liking it or you're not, I can also change the delivery of some of the things too. Like if they really like small group work, I can try to incorporate more of that into the course versus the larger discussions, to make sure everybody's getting engaged in different ways.
Yeah, definitely. For my students that I have this semester, I know there's some crazy things going on with housing. And so instead of having our like regular like uni class that we were supposed to have on Wednesday, we took half the class and we talked about, okay, so like who's moving, who's staying, who's going home. Like, is there anything that we need to do? Like, do we need to pause class? So that like students have time to move. We made some adjustments to the schedule so that instead of class on Monday, they just have like an assignment to submit so that they don't have to come to class on Monday because a lot of them are moving. So if they hadn't communicated with me, if my professor and I hadn't communicated, if the students hadn't communicated with the professor, none of that would have happened. She might not even have known. I don't know if they told professors. But definitely like that helped them a lot because I know they were very stressed and I'm not an RA, so I don't have answers for them. But them communicating and me communicating and the professor communicating really made things much easier for them and a lot less stressful for them.
That's awesome. And then what advice do you have for students who might be nervous to reach out to their instructors? Like Lauren and I were saying, we were always a little nervous to send that first email.
For me, I guess just, remind yourself that instructors are professors too, or people too. That's what I meant to say. They're people too. We get just as anxious and nervous. We have likes and dislikes just like any other people. Like that's always what helped ground me when I was a student of like, this is just another person. I know that idea of authority, being the professor, being the instructor, puts that added weight on there, but for the most part, like we all got into these roles because we want to work with students and we want to help you, that we don't want you to be as nervous about just reaching out. Even if you think it's a very simple question, it might be that you're the fourth person that's asked me that, and I realize now I have to address this amongst the whole class. So I guess the advice would just be remind yourself that you're just talking to another human, because that is something that is going to prepare you for the real world, for lack of a better word too. Like you might have to call on a supervisor or something when you're working full time. And that's nerve-wracking. So remind yourself that they're a person, but also like biggest advice is just bite the bullet and do it. You probably won't ever regret it. Most students I hear from are like, oh, I'm really glad that I emailed you. I'm really glad I reached out. So sometimes you just got to push yourself out of that comfort zone.
Yeah, I think uni is a great place also to learn how to send an email like that. Because like not only are like most uni professors like very understanding that like, these students just came in from high school. This is their first semester at college. They might not have had to email their high school professors, but they also have a Seahawk link like me who is a student and is there kind of not like holding their hand, but there to guide them and help them. So if they're nervous, I always tell my students, if you don't know how to send an email, come to me. It's an email. I still have people read over my emails. Like if I have to send an important one, I'll get my roommate or I'll get, somebody else and I'll be like, hey, can you read over this real quick before I send it? Just to make sure. So yeah, always ask for help.
I definitely second that. Almost any email I need to send, like I need someone else to look over this just to make sure that is all good. And then, so we have a lot of parents and families watching this. So what advice do you have for parents and family members to help support their students in communicating with instructors?
I think the biggest one is to encourage your student to really do it themselves. I think like Lauren just said, they might not have had to do that in high school. So this is kind of new territory for them, but it is a building block for them. This is something they're going to have to do for the rest of their life, whether it be in a college setting or in a workplace setting. And this is a great place for them to grow that skill set. It's okay for them to not have it perfect the first time and learn to communicate from that point on. The other side of it, and this is getting a little bit more technical, but as an advisor, if a parent contacts me, I'm actually legally not allowed to say a whole lot to you. I can talk very general policy and things like that, but FERPA laws protect student academic information that I can only speak to your student unless they've kind of given permission through FERPA to do that. So sometimes it just creates a frustrating runaround of if you call me and I end up having to tell you, look, I can't say a whole lot. I can explain the policy in general, but like we'll have to get Caroline on the phone to talk to her about what the process is. Sometimes it's just easier if you have your student do that outreach. And then if you need to be involved, they can loop you in with me later. But that's kind of the more technical side of it. I hate to take it there, but there is that piece that instructors, advisors, we're tied by FERPA laws. So sometimes if your student isn't the one reaching out, that we cannot be as helpful as if it was them contacting us directly.
Yeah, I think definitely for these first year students, if they need help sending an email, have them write it. And then as a parent, guardian, you could look over it. And, you know, if there's like any issues, help them through that, but have them write it themselves. Because as a student, they need to learn how to do that because they're not always going to have you to write their emails for them. And if you just do it for them all the time, they're never going to learn. So yeah, definitely make them do it. And then you can be there to help afterwards.
Awesome. And then I have one last question for Kelsey, and that is, what advice could you share for students that are going to be moving home in the next week or so?
Open communication with your faculty is the biggest one. So every class is going to be a little different for how they're managing this move in the next week or so. So I think if you are unclear how your class is going to move forward, make sure you ask those clarifying questions now. Don't assume that your instructor might be sending a separate email and it just hasn't come through yet. Your instructor might be thinking, oh, well, I'm not changing anything, so I don't need to send an email. And you might be going, well, are they changing it? I don't know. I haven't heard anything. Feel free, reach out, ask them, because chances are you're also not the only one in class asking that question. That is a better method too than going through like a GroupMe or something like that, because you're getting it directly from the instructor. So I would just communicate with the instructor to ask kind of how is the class changing? What are the new expectations? If you're going from a face-to-face to an online, get those technology pieces kind of clear, figured out. Chances are we're going to be using Zoom. So if you hadn't done that yet, maybe play around with some of the tutorials on there. The Keep Learning website is amazing. There's a lot of great modules through that on Canvas that can kind of walk you through some of these things. So if you're a little hesitant with the technology, I'd start there. But on the other side of that is not just like, how's the class changing, but what are your needs as well? Like if you're moving home because you are somebody that has to quarantine, communicate that with your instructors. You don't have to directly say like, I'm going home to quarantine or I tested positive for COVID, but you need to communicate like, I'm not feeling very well. I don't know that I will be in class today. How can I make up this assignment? What is the expectation if I'm not here? Because again, if you don't communicate with me, I don't know if you went home because you're sick or if you just slept through my class. There's not a way for me to differentiate that. And if you are feeling sick or you're having to quarantine, I will work with you, but I need to know that. If you don't communicate at all, I don't know what your situation is. So it's kind of twofold, like communicate to figure out what's going on in the next week or so, but keep that communication going through the end of the semester if things come up where you're not able to make it to class and you're going to need a makeup assignment. Because again, if we don't have that communication, we don't know which end of the spectrum to kind of fall on in terms of attendance and makeup assignments and things like that.
For sure. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. You both provided so much good insight for how to continue the semester and start the next for everyone. And so just thank you both again so much for joining us. If you are watching and would like to sign up for our family newsletter, you can go to uncw.edu/transition and then click on the Family Programs tab and then the Family Resources tab, and that'll take you right to where you can sign up. And then we are also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at UNCW Transitions. And our Facebook Live videos are located on our Facebook page, and they are also uploaded to YouTube. So if you joined late or you missed it live, like don't worry, it's still around and you can watch it whenever is convenient for you. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next month.